Welcome to the My Cow podcast, and my name is Shaun and I've enjoyed over 20 years working with New Zealand farmers with dairy nutrition and cow health. Now, a special thank you goes out to Advanced Nutrition as our primary supporter. The focus of this podcast is to be a vehicle for delivering relevant insights to dairy farmers and ag professionals, all to help drive cow efficiency and farm business profitability, because stronger businesses are more sustainable and help to build stronger communities. Welcome everyone to the My Cow podcast, and a little bit of a different one today. I've got the selfie stick out, and I'm out in the paddock with Conan here from Force of Nature Consulting. So just really keen to, the reason I did the video, I was really keen to look at what we're doing or how we actually measure quality soil. So how we actually look at whether the soil is good on our farms, whether things are cycling. My knowledge is a little bit limited, but I'm looking forward to hearing a bit more from you, mate. So, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. G'day everyone. I'm Colin Moynihan. I'm a farm consultant here in Canterbury. I run a company called Force of Nature Consulting, which is basically general farm consulting and coaching. I do a lot in the environmental space, agronomy through a company called Agronomics, which is probably going to be a lot of the focus of today, and then also business strategy and coaching. So work with a lot of livestock farmers and mixed arable across Canterbury, and I'm real passionate about building resilient and profitable farm systems.
Yeah, cool. And you have a great podcast too.
Yeah, I've got a podcast as well. So,
which I enjoy. So it's nice to get a bit of collaboration in the market, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be great to have a chat today and put our skills together.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it, man. I'm really passionate about soil. Like if we can get the soil right, then everything else flows. Like quality of grass, animal health, production, the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think you underestimate your level of knowledge in that space as well. So it's going to be cool to kind of vibe off each other and have a really good conversation about this.
Yeah, or you can put me to the test. How's that sound?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll get into it. I see you've dug a hole. I want to make one naughty comment. It's quite a small hole.
Yeah, it is a small hole. Sorry.
That's right.
It's actually a bit harder to dig here than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Well, we're in a hoka, right? So this is heavy. This is proper
heavy soil, and
it's more like North Island. Yeah,
and it's actually quite dry, which is surprising because it is heavy soil. Yes. It's irrigated, and we have had some rain recently. But as you can see, it's quite blocky as well. Mm-hmm. So we've got some half decent covers here as well. But if we're going to look at soil, the first thing we want to do when we're ripping out a hole here is basically do a spade square, which everyone's pretty familiar with. And first thing we want to do is kind of like pull it in half and look at it like that. And this kind of gives us a really good indication of where that 80% of those roots are. So are they getting down deep, or are they restricted to an area like we're looking like here? So we're probably looking at 50 mil, 60 mil of where 80% of our roots are. So essentially that's the fuel tank this particular paddock, or in this area here, is working with. So that means we've got a limit around our ability to access nutrients and moisture that's further down.
Right. So getting the roots down deep obviously is going to give the plant more access to nutrient. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely correct. So I like to think of our root profile is like a V8 engine. So if we've got a compaction layer and we can only access a certain level, say this amount, it's like an V8 engine that's working on 4 cylinders. So we can't get all the power, we can't get all the production out of this, and we just don't access basically all those free nutrients and moisture that's further down. So that creates less resilience in our system when, say, if we're part of an irrigation scheme like we are, a lot of people are in Canterbury, if that gets switched off, then we can become pretty open to nor'wests and other weather patterns that dry things out pretty quickly. So
yeah, sure, which is a big thing in Canterbury, eh? So basically what you're saying, focusing on soil health, getting the soil structure right and the balance right actually helps the soil utilize and store water better.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we get our grazing management right, we can actually pump a lot of carbon into the soil. And when we're getting those excess carbon from basically the photosynthetic process, that's when we start storing that carbon in a longer term form. And that's how we improve our water holding capacity in our soil. So for every 1% increase in stored organic carbon in the soil, that's about 144,000 litres per hectare more that we can store in a rainfall event. What does that really mean? It's about 17 millimetres. So if we can store 17 millimetres more in a decent rainstorm, that means we don't have to switch the irrigators on as often, and we might be able to have like extended periods between turning them on instead of having them running constantly. So that's quite a big cost for a lot of farms. So how do we reduce that?
Yeah. Well, and when the nor'west's blowing and we're losing 7 or 8 mil a day and we can only put on 6, probably pretty useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some ideas around how do we actually utilize that. Is it worth turning the irrigator on when we're losing 6 to 8 mil a day,
Yes.
and it's blowing horizontally? Maybe it's better to wait till 6 o'clock when it typically starts to die down and switch it on at night and try and get a good drenching in there.
Yeah, and lean on your stored capacity, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
interesting.
when we're talking, I guess the next phase is once we've had a look at where those roots are, we also kind of want to look at that soil aggregation. Like as we can see here, we're seeing quite a bit of blockiness, which is not what we really want to see. We want to see free aggregation. So if we go down a bit deeper, typically we'll find these smaller aggregates underneath where we've got these compaction layers, which we're still getting quite a decent few blocks all the way through the profile. So we're starting to see this more aggregation, but we're still seeing blocking in there. So we want to observe that. And when we're doing a visual soil assessment, essentially a really good way to understand how your soil formation is to drop it 3 times and then lay it out on either in a bin or a piece of plastic. And you kind of go from the top like that, and you just go biggest blocks all the way down to the smallest. And that kind of gives you an indication of how your soil would score within the VSA, but how that structure is actually formulating, because structure is a really key part and limiting factor in your grass production, but also crop as well if you're going into crop for winter.
Do you think you could, dig holes and look at soil structure between paddocks and that would give you an indication of soil health and potential, I guess, productive capacity in different paddocks?
Yeah, absolutely. It really can vary even within paddocks, that productive capacity, and things like where we've nailed a part of the paddock because of wet weather will have obviously more likely this blocking underneath it. But a really good comparison to do is if you've got longer term fence lines that have been there, say 10 years, is to go dig a hole in the paddock in a couple of spots so you can kind of scope what's consistent through there, and then go look at the fence line and see what that natural state is. So if it hasn't been touched for a long time, hasn't been cultivated, still gets a bit of grazing pressure every now and then because the cows will still eat underneath the fence, that will give you an indication of, is your management changing what the actual structure of that soil is? And then how does that flow throughout the farm? So we can start making some decisions around, actually, we've got areas that are a bit harder, got more compaction. Maybe that's the ones we need to prioritize doing a bit of aeration, or that is the reason why we're not getting as good a production in terms of grass quality and volume through a season.
Interesting. Because I hear a lot of farmers will say, oh, like the average in my area is 14 tonne and I'm growing or harvested, and I'm only growing sort of 12 or 13, or they might, their neighbour might be harvesting 16 to 18 and they might only be doing 14. Definitely, further from a chemical soil analysis, I could imagine going and actually doing these visual soil assessments be very, just an important part of the process, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about that feedback loop, like what are we observing on the farm? And I think the visual assessments will give you a lot quicker understanding of how your management is changing things. Whereas if you're looking at your chemical and elements, that's normally a snapshot within a year, and that can change based on seasons and just flows within the climate.
Yep.
So it's
Cool.
putting those all together and then looking for things like how many worms are in those holes when you're visually doing it, because a really good number of worms is we're looking 20 to 25 plus per spade hole. And that kind of gives you an indication of that soil microbiome is starting to function really well. So without having to go and do a full soil food web test, that's a really good indication that you're starting to get that soil microbiology flowing. This is also the third piece of the puzzle when it comes to soil.
So the number of worms, does it fluctuate through the season? So if it's really it's quite cold at the moment, I just noticed in this hole there's not much
No, I haven't found a worm
activity
yet. It definitely fluctuates. Like when it starts getting hotter, we start seeing them go down further. A really good time to do it is probably that early spring. I seem to find consistently the most worms when I'm going throughout, and then things heat up and it dries out, they start pushing down lower. And also the same in winter, they're going down because it's cold at the top. So
cool.
they're just protecting themselves. And they also will hang out in different portions of the soil throughout the season as well. Like at times you'll see them sitting around the top, and all this sort of stuff. And then other times you'll see them going down. Then we've got to recognize that there's different types of worms. So recently found out if they've got a black head, they're the ones that go up and down vertically. And those are the guys we want because they're taking nutrients down from the top, like this kind of thatch or organic matter. And they're storing that further down for nutrients. So we want to create that process as well within our system. And obviously that funnels through air and water at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're sort of that in between of a well-functioning ecosystem, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously a lot of the other microbiology, it's very hard to see. So worms are a good indication that everything else is starting to function really well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, like if you went onto a farm like here where you haven't found a lot of worms, what would you say are the key things to start with? Like, would you look at the soil aggregation like you are there, and then work on that chemically, or what would be your top tips for getting more worms in your soil?
I think the first thing to do would be go and dig some more holes and just figure out what is the actual state within this paddock.
Yes,
because we do have bear in mind this is actually still a small hole, and we're in a couple of hectares here.
It's a bit of a low spot too.
Yeah, and
where
like
it's wetter,
at this time of year, I would still expect to be still seeing worms showing up. Maybe I need to dig deeper and find them, but
well,
it'd be understanding what the limiting factor is here. And we kind of look at 5 processes around, is it sunlight that's the limiting factor? I don't think sunlight at the moment is the limiting factor.
Early October,
it's a sunny day with temperature can be a limiting factor, but we've had good warmth recently. Hopefully the end of the frost, that's probably been our limiting factor in Canterbury this season, has been temperature more than anything. Then it's water. So there has been sufficient rainfall, although we have had 2 weeks in nor'west, but we've had rainfall, we get irrigation. You can feel a bit of moisture in there, but it's probably drier than I thought it would be for this type of soil.
Yes.
Then we're looking at the mineral element, so getting some testing done, having a look at the trace elements within that because they actually pack a really big punch. And then the final part is kind of that microbiology. Are they the limiting factor as well? So it's testing, basically going through doing some visual looks, then we're doing some testing, and then figuring out what that lowest hanging fruit is in this regard. And this one here, because we are seeing quite a lot of blockiness, we've got quite a lot of the roots in the top part. It's almost creating a thatch effect. So the microbiology is not breaking this down, but also we can't get air further down through there. Water's probably just been sitting on top while we're not seeing water getting further down. And also your fertilizer is just going to sit on top here as well. So we're basically creating an environment where the roots don't have to go any further down, and it's just kind of restricting everything, and the airflow is not getting in there for natural gas as well. So there's a few issues here, but it might be dependent on this paddock. It could be a combination of mechanical aeration, but when we do anything mechanical, we need to think about the other legs of the stool, so the biology and the minerals as well. So what do we need calcium in here to flocculate the soil, or do we need to feed the microbiology, the stuff that we're looking for here, to get them really punching away through maybe a sugar or a carbon source, and just start getting them reproducing and really starting to break things down and get things shifting. Because we just do one part of, we'll just do the mechanical and try to sort the aggregation, we'll be back in the same spot in 3 years' time. So we need to have a kind of a holistic plan we'll start with mechanical, but we need to fix the other parts of the puzzle as well.
Right. So mechanical is obviously you're ripping, physically breaking the soil out, and your chemical is what you're doing with fertilizer, lime, and minerals, and
sometimes
things.
like the people are out there are ripping and just dripping like some liquid calcium down the back at the same time, so they're getting it in at depth. And you can do things as well like putting in fish or
so you're doing chemical and mechanical, but you're actually speeding up the chemical process
and getting it at depth, so it's kind of
smart,
getting everything going. And I think if you can do that, you're going to be a lot more successful in moving and shifting the soil into a more productive state. And if you'll normally see quite a good flush after doing any sort of aeration, because you're getting that air and gas exchange within the soil, opening everything up. That stimulates the microbes, and you'll see a really good response in terms of grass growth off the back of that. But it's how do we get that long term?
Yeah, absolutely, and actually improve things. Because you had a really interesting point around the roots being at the top, and the soil's almost just not mixing efficiently, so you're not getting that transfer of nutrient from the top down deeper. Yeah. So would you say like a soil that's in really good health and has really high capacity is, it has good aggregation and those roots are going down a lot deeper?
Yeah, absolutely. So aggregation is probably going to be your number one.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got really good aggregation, I've only ever been on one farm that's been like this, but it's like you're walking across a trampoline in the
Wow.
pasture, and that's generally what our paddock should feel like. But when you walk a lot across a lot of our paddocks, because particularly in dairy,
Mm.
like over 80% of our dairy farms have compaction to quite a significant level. So we feel that hardness.
Yeah.
And if we get a penetrometer out, sometimes it's like it's hard for the first to the compaction layer. And then when we break through, we've got that really good aggregation underneath. So
Yep.
we've got to understand
Which
that
is
this
kind of what
blocking
we're
isn't,
seeing, eh?
yeah. And that's really, really, really common. Is like if you
Mm-hmm.
dig deeper, you'll start seeing what the actual soil profile looks
Yeah,
like
it's actually
underneath.
nice and crumbly.
Um, but we've still got a little bit of that depth. But as you can see,
Yep.
it's dark and it's
Yeah.
crumbly. Like the color of this is actually is what you'd kind of associate with really good
Mm-hmm.
carbon stocks.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, it looks like nice soil.
yeah. The other thing to do is smell it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all very familiar with that really nice uh, soil or earthy smell. I think it's almost ingrained and coded in our brains. I like to think of it as like that smell that you get after a summer rainfall. Like everything seems to be flourishing. Um, and you smell that in your soil, then it's kind of a good representation that the soil microbiology in the soil is really healthy. There's good airflow in it, and everything is starting to function as we should.
Yeah, cool.
Another really probably one of the key ones to show that your soil microbiology and your soil's functioning really well is what we call the rhizosphere. So this is basically this area around the plant roots. So if we've got a really well functioning soil, the plant is interacting with the microbiology. We'll start seeing aggregation stick around our roots.
Mm-hmm.
Almost looks like dreadlocks.
Oh, like these
But
little guys in here.
yeah, but
Interesting.
they'll be even smaller than that. And it's like almost a waxy coating. And that's basically the soil or the liquid carbon from the photosynthetic process coming out through the roots and feeding the microbiology. But as you can see here, we've got pretty clean roots. So we're not getting that active carbon being replenished into the soil, which is probably one of the limiting factors here.
Mm.
So,
Which is pretty amazing. Like this is a high production farm. Like it grows
yeah,
a
yeah,
good amount of
exactly.
grass. Like
So
it's not.
that's the
It's
hard thing. I've
yeah,
got
yeah.
a client in Central Otago that they grow 14 tonne of grass and 30 tonne fodder beet crops. But if you walk around from probably late November, it's like hitting a car park. You can't find anywhere to put a hole in the ground to actually get your spade in. I've never been in soil across that, but they can still grow a lot.
Mm.
So the thing is here is, well, it seems like my soil is functioning really well, but what are we putting in there to make sure we can still get that production? And a lot of our farms in Canterbury, we're feeding a lot of water and a lot of soluble fertilizer, and we're shortcutting basically the processes, which is all expensive inputs. So if they keep going up
Mm-hmm.
or we get a shortage of either of those, then our actual production in terms of grass growth becomes limited.
Yep.
And that turns up in the vat,
Yeah, absolutely.
which is not
Or we
good.
can't keep using the same amount we were, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like
We're
we're seeing
seeing
with the
how that plays
190,
out.
that's
Yeah.
been a really good example. People
Uh-huh.
were using some pretty high amounts before that. Um, and then there's no reason, or we just don't know what's going to happen in future in terms of environmental uh, regulation and whether there's going to be a sinking cap. So how do we get way more efficient at using our inputs that we've already got through just simple switches in terms or additives? Like if we're using nitrogen, we should really be adding a carbon source to it. And in the terms of humates and urea, they kind of become perfect partners,
Mm.
and it stabilizes the urea. So in a really good farm, we might be utilizing 35% of that available nitrogen in it. Most farms aren't really utilizing that 35%. But if we
Yeah,
bring
wow.
in something like a humate, we can actually use less, but we also lessen the mineralization of that or the volatilization and less likely to leach it because it's stabilized that nutrient. So just adding, 2 or 3 kgs of humates with your nitrogen rounds
Mm.
has a massive impact on how well that flows through in your system,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
also reduces that environmental output. So
Yeah, so
if you've got a
more bang.
cap and you
Yeah.
can get a better utilization out of, say, your 190 or less, um, isn't that a win-win for the farmer's pocket? And you should be growing more grass out the back end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, especially now that we have caps, if you can get
Yeah.
more per unit, of nitrogen
Exactly.
grown. But also it just increases sustainability, because who knows what's coming.
Yeah,
We may have lower caps, and yeah, it's and it also plays into your greenhouse gas emission equation as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
So if
So
you can get an incentive, that could be another way of. So it's interesting. It's not just about growing more grass, is what I'm hearing. It is more about actually having a better balance, and utilizing what you are putting on better, essentially.
yeah, and I think that's efficiency is basically the game when it comes to profitability in farms and building that longer term profitability. We're not always just trying to maximize that next 12 months because sometimes when we take that approach to our production, we're actually starting to mine things like our soil, and that has a negative impact on our longer term profitability. And if our soils are degrading and slowly getting more compacted, and we're actually starting to see that we have to put more into our system to grow the same amount and produce the same amount in the vat, then actually we're eating away at our profitability. So for me, natural capital and essentially our soils are fundamental underpinning of our farm. And if
Mm,
we can get them naturally cycling as well as possible, then we should have reduced need for fertilizer inputs and also things like um, irrigation. But that also flows through to the cow as well. So if we've got a naturally cycling soil that can actually mobilize a lot of those nutrients that are in the soil already, that then goes through to a healthier plant and that goes through to a healthier cow. So
yeah,
we should have
awesome.
less need for, I guess, big vet bills throughout the season, hopefully,
Yeah.
or supplement.
Yeah, absolutely. Mate, you're answering all my questions. I love
Yeah.
it. It's too good. Cool. I'm gonna put this phone down. But actually, before we do that, I just want to circle back to the smell thing.
Yep.
Because I used to do this a lot. And
It's the first thing I generally do is
yeah, it's
dig,
funny, and I think
smell.
it's a natural thing to do as
Yeah,
well.
I think that's what I mean. Like it's kind of coded in our brain as humans. We
Yes.
essentially just naturally do that.
Yep.
And then that smell, when you do smell it, is just like it's so familiar.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, it is funny, It is like a coding. You just know instinctively that it smells good.
yeah.
Like, you did talk about a bit about that, but what about a bad smelling soil? Like, what are you smelling? Like, are you smelling something sharp or what?
It's like some people would describe it as it's like smelling death. So
Mm,
it's like something rotting away. But I feel like that's almost like the very end of the scale. You can also get a bit of a metal smell, like if you've got
uh-huh.
some issues around high types of mineral.
Yep.
Um,
Like
but then
high
yeah,
aluminiums and
things like
irons
that.
and things. Yep.
Yeah. And then like sometimes you'll get sauce that just don't really smell either, which is an issue.
Mm,
Um, so there's a full spectrum there, and it's just testing out. If it doesn't smell that good, it's probably a representation that things aren't going that well in the soil.
yep.
Um, and typically, what we want to see is that earthy smell, and that's kind of the representation of the soil microbiology. If we're
Yes.
going to that more death side with, or um, I guess the rotting animal sort of smell, or sulfury smell is probably good
Mhm.
representation as well.
Like anything sort of sharp or a little bit putrid, eh?
Yeah,
Yep.
and that's kind of representing that we're more leaning towards like that anaerobic
Yes.
bacteria within the soil. And those are the guys that flourish when there's not a lot of oxygen. And the
Yes.
problem with those guys is they actually like to eat some forms of their fungi, and their fungi really influence our structure and our ability to break down certain minerals, but also just helping to extend the roots. They form a beneficial relationship. So if we've got that kind of the soil going on the wrong way, then it's eating the good guys that we actually want in there. It's kind of that downward spiral. So
Mhm.
it's just something to be really aware of, is that smell, and you'll pick it up like, yeah, that doesn't smell good. And
Mm.
that may fluctuate throughout the season as well, and how strong that smell can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have a go at it, but I, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but would you say that yeah, that does have quite a good earthy smell. Would you say that what you're smelling is it's almost like the respiration of the
Yeah,
microbes in the soil, so they're actually giving off. So one thing I used to find is I'd find a lot of soils where you actually don't have a lot of smell at all, like they're
yeah, yeah,
almost a little bit inert.
yeah. And that I think that's probably pretty common. Like,
Mm,
not a strong smell, and then when you do smell something that's really strong, and you're like, oh wow,
mm,
that's before it even gets close to your face. It's kind of the same thing as like you don't know what a really good soil is until you
yeah,
see it and walk across it, and then you go, wow, that's the potential.
mm,
Um, So
Yeah,
I think
that's interesting.
it's
So
one
if
of
the
those things, if it's not very common and you haven't seen it before, you actually don't know what scale you're operating against.
yes,
So
yeah, and it's all interpretable, which
yeah,
is
exactly.
tricky. But if you were like, I guess, regularly through the year taking, like just doing these visual soil assessments and having a look, and you notice that your soil smell is getting stronger and more earthy, would you say that would be telling you that the microbial activity in the soil is getting better?
Yeah, yeah, that would probably be my first inclination there. And
Good.
then how is that flowing through and what we're seeing in the pasture, but
Yeah.
also having the conversation with the farm owner as well. Like, we're seeing what I'm seeing in the soil is that things are improving, but are you seeing that in all the data that you're getting as well? So when with agronomics, we go through and have our monthly visits, we're digging holes, we're running our meters on the pasture sap and everything, and just trying to build a picture of what's happening. But a real key part of that is the discussion with the farmer. So how are things going with the cows? What are they noticing out there? Is grass growth struggling? Are there any particular paddocks that are just not seeming to perform as well? And just building that picture, so then you can actually make really well informed decisions when it comes to fertilizer, and not just sticking to the plan. It's like, well, how do we adapt it throughout the season based on what's happening with the weather, grass growth, how the cows are performing, and what we actually need to achieve in terms of the farmer's goals.
One thing I was quite keen to pull apart in a bit more detail. Like, if a farmer was watching this and they're like, "Oh, I really want to, I just want to start the process of doing the job a bit better, or I want to look closer at my soil." And I've only ever sort of looked at my Balance and Ravensdown soil report, so then we've just chucked a bit of chemical fertilizer on. What would you say? Well, where would you suggest farmers start?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think got to be clear that fertilizer isn't inherently bad. It's the management around that. And I think the great place to start is actually just digging the holes,
Mm,
and seeing how things are progressing within the season and from season to season, but also looking at what are the trends between the soil tests that I've regularly had. Are they improving or things getting worse? Am I getting recommended the same thing and nothing's really shifting? Then it's like, well, actually, I need to start looking at something outside of that. And there's plenty of people independently out there that can help you across the country. But also just the fact that YouTube is an incredible resource around just understanding what you're looking for in soils, and what you can learn about different parts of it. I've learned a lot from there and continue to learn because there's some pretty incredible people working in this space globally.
yes.
And everything globally actually applies to us in our context. It's specifically with soils.
Yep.
The fundamentals are all the same. So for them, it's maybe looking at what the trends are. Are things improving? If not, or if we're seeing issues with the animals getting worse, maybe we need to start looking at maybe some independent advice. Get someone in, get some of their feedback, see if you actually vibe with them. That's probably really important because you're going to build a relationship that's kind of underpinning a lot of your farm and a big farming expense. So you want to actually be able to trust that person, understand what they're talking to you about.
Yes.
Um, and can they actually put it in terms that you understand? I think it's a really key part. How do you coach the farmer to understand what you're doing? So theoretically, the decisions are actually on their own, not you're telling them what to do. Because I think if the farmer takes ownership around it, then it's more likely to become part of their ethos, and that will flow through to a lot of other parts of their business. So that independent advice is a great starting point, just to check if things are heading in the right direction, or just troubleshooting a part of your system that you're not happy about, um,
Excuse me.
and coming up with a plan. And
Mm.
then a great way to test that is if things aren't improving in 3 to 5 years, then maybe they're not the right one. And sometimes it can be difficult figuring out who's right for your system.
Yeah, yeah, because fertilizer is the second biggest expense on
Yeah.
most farms, behind feed. So
Yeah, it's huge.
it's pretty big. Yeah,
And like
interesting.
inherently, sometimes with changing to an independent fertilizer company, you may end up spending a little bit more, or you're spending the same, but you're reprioritizing basically that fertilizer to maybe pulling out some of the nitrogen, but you're actually putting things into trace elements. Or calcium is always generally quite a good low hanging fruit for a lot of farms, and actually
Yes.
getting the calcium levels in the soil, because that actually flows through to the plants as well.
Yeah, yeah. Calcium's one of those really sort of key nutrients. Hey,
Yeah.
it's really important for cycling and helps balance everything. And
Oh, massively. I was kind of like a bully in the soil as well because it's such a big
yes,
molecule. So it opens things up, but it's also really key for like your plant nutrition as well. And making it more palatable for livestock as well. So you've got to have really good calcium levels in the plant as well as the soil. And just because you've got good levels in the soil doesn't mean it gets into the plant. You need the microbiology to sometimes get that through. And there's about 80% of most minerals in the soil have to go through some form of soil microbiology to be plant available. So if we don't have those in the soil, then we can't access it. But then on the other side, if we don't have the minerals in the soil, then they're just not created as thin air. So New Zealand, we've got pretty low selenium levels, so we still need to be able to supplement that in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So I listened to the podcast. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go out into the paddock, dig some holes,
Yep.
and find out what's going on. I see that the top part of the soil's quite blocky. It's not.
Yep.
It doesn't feel like it has a lot of air in it. It doesn't have a much smell at all. It's almost a bit inert. What would be the first thing, like actually just getting some lime on, or getting some more specific soil tests, or what would you recommend?
Before applying anything, I would be getting soil tests because you
Yep.
can also put on too much of a good thing
Yep.
and then create other issues. So it's definitely getting the soil tests, figuring out what is going to be the most economical route for you. So it could be lime, it could be mechanical aeration, but it's also really important to test things and not just go full hog across the whole property, especially if it's something you're not familiar with. You want to build that confidence that it's going to work. There's also a really quick way to fix soils, particularly in terms of aggregation, is the use of annuals. And I think that's something we can bring into our dairy systems as a really key part to like that early spring, particularly here in Canterbury, growing some really high quality feed that helps push out our round length. So we've got plenty of grass going on later. But when we have those annuals, because they're only there for a year, they're capturing a lot of sunlight from the atmosphere, sunlight from the sun, and they're turning that into a hell of a lot of sugars because they're trying to basically grow as fast as they can, feed that soil microbiology so they can get the elements from the soil so they can hit reproduction. So they're pumping a heap of sugar in that soil and they're pushing their roots down really quickly. So annuals, whether it be, a kind of a mixed species. But when I talk mixed species, it's not diversity for the sake of diversity. It's, 2, maybe 4 max. And you could do a summer annual into a winter annual and then back into a summer annual and then back into a permanent pasture mix, or you could sow it straight in. And that should hopefully and quite quickly fix your soil structure and get that microbiology going. And there's some really cool successes around that. And I think there's also an opportunity through across the whole platform where people could, like, say, every 3 years stitch in a few annuals. And that just kind of spreads out that pasture curve and hopefully, that early spring. Plenty of really good feed in that point there, but also late autumn as well. So
Okay, that's so fascinating about the annuals.
yeah,
So I'm just really interested now.
yeah.
So I'm sure, hopefully my questions will flow through. But let's say everybody does damage in the spring. They bring their dry cows home, they bring their springers home, and you've got to keep those springers tight on grass, especially in Canterbury. Reasonably high potassium levels.
Absolutely.
And so you're doing that damage, and often we just oversowing a bit of pasture, or we'll put those paddocks back into crop or whatever. Would you suggest going and actually putting an annual over top of the sporadic grass that's left in there, and that will actually improve the structure of that soil that's had a bit of damage, bit of impact?
Yeah, I mean, everything is context specific, which is really annoying. So without knowing farm situation, it's pretty
Yes.
hard. But if it's going into crop, then I think you could just go annual straight out of that.
Yep.
And there's some cool stuff already happening in terms of like fodder beet where people are sowing oats at the same time, so they don't have to get in later, less tractor passes, but it also there's something growing there straight away, sucking up all that nutrients.
Yep.
Then if you can go into another annual out of that, fix it really quickly. But there's no reason that you couldn't do that on a springer paddock. It's just be trialing it and seeing if it works, because there can be 2 dairy farms beside each other, and it'll work for one and not the other. And what are your goals and what are you trying to achieve? So
like everything we do on the
it's a
podcast,
real pain in the ass. So, yeah.
Talk to your rural professionals and get that advice, but also be careful who you talk to, because there is people out there that will shut down new ideas. And so, I love working with farmers that are willing to try new things, and they'll get out there and they'll be like, "Yep, this works really well on my farm." But definitely talking to the right people, getting good advice, really important. So I appreciate that. But it's it's just fascinating to see what different people are doing and how what you plant in the soil has quite a big impact on the health of the soil.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's kind of an old adage of saying if you got diversity above ground, you'll have diversity in the
Mm,
microbiology below ground. But then there's also some thinking around having a heap of diversity, say over 10 to 12 different species, you kind of get a diminishing return, similar to like you have if you're putting on too much nitrogen, you get a diminishing return in terms of things. So we want to have that diversity in our pasture systems, but then we have to actually manage for that, which is a different way in grazing. And I think that's where people have been caught short when they've gone to the diverse species mixes.
mhm.
And also, you don't go full hog like anything. Like the max you would ever put on a farm would be 10%, and that's still quite a lot if you've never experienced that before and haven't figured out the grazing system with that. Um, but if we want to create a really diverse microbiome underneath the soil, we need different plants in there because they feed different microbiology as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard people talk about building the house around the
Yeah,
soil, and it does make sense because what you just showed us before, it's quite blocky at the top,
yeah,
and there's good aggregation down the bottom.
yeah.
But tell us a bit more about building the house and using your soil tests, using your herbage tests, and then also your physical soil assessments to make really good informed decisions. Because just because it's within the recommended range doesn't mean it's necessarily good, like for calcium, for
Yeah,
instance.
exactly. And there's thoughts around different types of testing, not only in New Zealand, but globally, and what is actually the right test to do. Um, so that is also a point of contention, and you'll come across that quite a lot, especially going from, say, your two big fertilizer companies to, say, a independent. They'll have somewhat different soil testing protocols. The key part is that I've mentioned before is that if you've got it in the soil, it doesn't automatically mean it's going through to the plant. And that's why herbage testing and sap testing is super important to understand actually, well, I've got a full pantry and I've got the perfect soil test, but my plants are really struggling. So what am I lacking in that connection between the soil and plant, and how do I identify that? Well, it's actually testing the plants throughout the season and figuring out what's actually available to that, and then making recommendations and tailoring your fert throughout the season for that. So what we're seeing through agronomics, they've done heaps of work with this, particularly in Canterbury. We actually see throughout the season, like different trace elements and that become available, and then they drop off. So there's that, even that season variation within just pasture of what the plants are accessing and what the microbiology is feeding them with, which is really
Mm,
interesting to see.
it is.
But then how do we tailor our fertilizer programs for that so
Mm,
that we're getting those trace elements into the system for the plants, which then ultimately go to the livestock?
yeah. Then you know put a whole lot of lime on, and then you find
Yeah.
that your other mineral levels come up as well because
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the thing with lime is it doesn't go like that. It's not a you put 1 ton on and you get X amount. After a while, it kinda compounds and a
Yes.
little amount will do a lot. So we've got to be also very aware of that as well. But like you say, it does open up the soil. And with that comes obviously the microbiology start flourishing, and then they start breaking down those minerals that are locked in the soil and making that plant available, and you'll see that coming through into the plant.
Mm,
So it's a complex little beast, and you're trying to figure out little bits
mm.
from it all. And that's why the observation around spades and how the cows are eating the grass and what's happening in the vat and their health are all just little points of the data pieces that help to make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, the farmers that I've seen make the most progress in terms of soil health are generally working with people like yourself.
Yeah.
With agronomics or other companies out there that are really switched on and they've already got an interest in it anyway, which is great. Done a bit of YouTubing and
Yeah.
different things. There's some great guys in the US and other places that are doing some cool stuff. But yeah, I think having someone that it is their craft so that you have a good plan because it takes time, eh? Like we'll put a whole lot of lime on farm because soil structure is not right, and it takes 3 years for that
Mhm.
to really fully start releasing in the soil. And like you say, it's exponential. We can keep piling it on. We get to 3 years, and all of a sudden we've got too much calcium
Yeah.
being released. So getting good advice, is really important. But I think even more so with soils because there is such a lag,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can get it wrong.
Yeah. And that's the thing is lime takes, as an example, takes so much time to come through and flow. So as I said earlier, you kind of need 3 to 5 years for someone to understand if what they're doing is actually working. If you're chopping, changing every years, then there's no consistency there, and you're most likely going to be in the same place or maybe worse. But things like lime coming through. There are cool products that are around that are kind of liquid forms of calcium that work a lot quicker. But is that the same thing as mechanical aeration? We've just dumped it in and it's got into the system, but is that going to residually be there for the longer term?
Mm,
How do we make those decisions and how do we understand that? So
yeah.
it's
Farming's a hustle.
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And like we always say, you kind of people that go into start kind of getting that soil bug.
Mm,
And then when you get the soil bug, it's like a hole, you just keep digging. There's just so many different areas within it that you can get into. Um, and like I'm by no means a world expert on it. I know enough and I'm continuously trying to learn. And the best way to learn is by doing with a lot of
mm,
those things. And
absolutely.
yeah, there's there's you can do all the minerals, the elements, and the microbiology, and then there's is your soil oxidizing or in a reducing state, and that
Mm,
creates another whole level, which I need to do a lot more work on. But that influences mineral availability and
mm.
soil respiration and all sorts of things. So
Yeah, it's
if you're getting
incredible,
to that
hey?
level, then yeah,
Yeah.
it's getting pretty tough.
In some ways, it's kind of good we can't control everything too much
Yeah.
because, the soil, you just let it do its thing and keep things relatively balanced. It will function pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like if you've got that rhizophagy that I was talking about earlier,
Yeah.
like that creates so much of a buffer. Like if your pH is out by 2, that can still, within that little element around the root, it'll adjust that and it'll adjust elements and whatnot. So it can make quite a big change. So if you're within scope and the soil's working really well, it normally kind of self stacks itself together and makes things work, which is pretty cool.
Yes.
I think it's the most important thing for the farmer is just what is state is my soil in currently, and is it getting better or worse? And in terms of pasture species, am I seeing more desirable species are still flourishing, or am I having to see spray out and redo my pasture more regularly because I'm getting more weed species coming through, and I'm just only ending up with ryegrass? So, how do we make these observations, and what does that mean for our soil and our which underpins everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And it certainly flows through to animal health. Like I've got a
Yeah.
farm that I'm working with further south in central Canterbury, and they consistently run lower milk ureas,
Mm.
especially in the autumn or the summer autumn when
Yeah.
everyone else is 35 or wherever else. These guys are mid 20s and they're using very little nitrogen. They use some mixed species and it has a significant impact on the animal and that flows through to animal health as well, of course.
Absolutely. And you'll probably find that since they've made those switches, they might actually be producing more in the vat
Mm,
as well. There's some really good research done around the mixed species and how that actually improves animal health,
hmm
lowers environmental footprint, but also has big inputs into the vat. It's just how do we manage for that? Because it's normally once we get to the whole system level, it's a system change in the way in our ethos around grazing and the way in we feed our system
mm,
in terms of nutrients. So starting small, seeing if it works, adapting to your context because not everything is a blanket,
yep.
um, and don't put diversity in just for the sake of diversity. It's what functional groups do we want to achieve, and 6 to 8 species in your pasture is a lot better than throwing 30 in there and having a really expensive pasture that only half of them turn up in
Yeah,
anyway.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that leads me on to like one of my pet topics and projects. Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Where I see the industry going is energy density or nutrient density
yep,
in feed, animal, and the product that the animal produces. And so one thing we're trying to do with nutrition is we're not just trying to feed the cow more, like get more kilos of dry matter growing, more kilos of dry matter down her throat.
mm,
We're actually trying to produce more kilos of milk
yep,
per kilo of dry matter eaten because what that does is it means the cow's a better converter or a more efficient converter, but it also means that it's a more sustainable system. You're producing less emissions, and so you just have a more sustainable, stronger, more profitable business. So there's always been this sort of quantity push, but now I think there's a real quality push. By fixing or having a better quality soil, can we grow a more nutrient dense feed? So it's the same kilos of dry matter going down the cow's throat, but it's actually going to produce more kilos of milk or better quality milk.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's what nutrient density is. well, I think we should preface nutrient density is basically how many nutrients are in a calorie of a certain food, but thinking about it, sugar can be quite nutrient dense. So it's actually that nutrient richness. And we've actually lost that since the Second World War, just through some of our practices in agronomy, have led to basically quite big reductions in the range of nutrients within that food. And what good looks like is also very hard to understand in terms of that scale. But what we do with our soil basically sets that up. So think of it as the livestock under our feet. That's the soil microbiology. If we've got diversity in those guys, that flows through to our plant through the elements. So we've got those guys breaking down that locked up nutrients within the soil and putting it into a plant available for in the soil solution that's taken up by the plant. So if we've got less deficiencies in those plants, then it's going to have better feeding for the livestock as well. So you're not going to have that deficiency that flows all the way through from the soil to the livestock and then ultimately us as the humans. And as you say, I think that's the next big opportunity for farming, particularly livestock farming in New Zealand, is around nutrient density and how do we create that. And we've seen some really great work over at Lincoln from Pablo Gregorini around diversity and what that does in terms of pasture mixing. But now he's gone to this next level, which is the functional diversity, which is basically we've taken the mixed salad and we've separated it out into parts. So if this paddock here would have 6 different sections, so it might be chicory, clover, ryegrass, plantain, and the cows will go across and choose that. And that has had really significant outcomes in terms of environment, but also milk in the vat, lamb growth rates, beef growth rates, and also just the quality of the food on the other side because they're testing that as well. And they've actually done some testing on people that they fed beef after it, blood testing, and it was just all these health indicators are through the roof and basically reducing cholesterol and anti-inflammatory things as well. So that's the big opportunity, and it also comes through in our milk. And the great thing with milk is we get to see it every day in the vat. I think we'll get to the point where they will start looking at those nutrients, or there'll be a premium for that better quality milk.
Which is always the better game, right? Like
Yeah,
selling a higher quality product for a higher margin.
yeah,
Because, for us in New Zealand to take on the big boys is pretty tough.
yeah. And I think, like, even if we changed everything here to go organic, as milk production, we still couldn't feed the whole world, and that's a premium in itself. But just because you're organic doesn't mean you've got better nutrient density. It's all about that soil function, and there's been some work done in the US by the Bionutrient Food Association, and they were basically tying nutrient density back to the farming practices. And it didn't matter what type of farmer you were, it's basically how well was your soil functioning and what practices enhanced that, and that was the big factor. So if we can start thinking like that, and then we start having these conversations with our processors, then we will start seeing a market shift there. And that is where the premium is in those health brands too.
Yeah, that's exciting because, I was talking before about that farm that has a bit of diversity. Their feed conversion efficiency is definitely higher.
Yeah.
Like they feed less kilos of dry matter, but get more kilos of milk per kilo of dry matter. So like there's trade-offs with how you manage it and all those sort of things. But as we learn and as we grow in that space, I see some great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked before about how there's opportunity for better feeding of livestock in terms of just partial mixed ration. But if we can get that right diversity in our soil pastures anyway, it's kind of creating that same effect. So we wouldn't have to feed so much supplement.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of ways to skin the cat essentially about how we can feed our livestock better. And if we can have a really strong base in terms of soil, and then we're feeding really good quality food and really good quality supplement at the same time, like you say, we'll see that in the vat. Well, that feed conversion efficiency should be a really good driver, I think, for farmers in trying to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always say to guys that we're feeding the rumen to feed the cow because the rumen feeds the cow, but maybe we're actually feeding the soil to feed the plant, to feed the rumen that feeds the cow. Like it's quite a chain of events where we can manipulate things all the way along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a farmer, they've got so much to manage, it's quite overwhelming. But if we're livestock farmers, that's really should be what we're trying to optimize is that rumen and getting it functioning as well as we can through really proper feeding.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there is so much for farmers to manage. So maybe it is where you bring in someone, say a soil consultant or a ruminant nutrition who can help you understand that, but also coach you along so you can actually start learning the process So over time, you can make the decisions yourself quite confidently. Um, because at the end of the day, these are really some of the fundamentals of what really underpins your farm profitability and your success as a farmer is actually having really strong natural capital, functioning well, and really well-fed livestock that are flourishing, and you're getting those epigenetics and the genetics over time as they are breeding through.
Yeah, that's another big topic.
Yeah.
Epigenetics, super cool. It's amazing how you can make a decision today and how you feed
Yeah.
the grandmother, or the your cows that are carrying a calf, but are also that calf is also developing an oocyte or an egg that will be the grandchild. And so how you make those decisions that affects all those generations, eh? It's incredible.
Oh, absolutely. It's a big can of worms there, but I think
Yeah,
most farmers are
definitely.
familiar. If you set up your heifers really well,
Yep.
that flows through into your herd
Oh yeah.
until the day they leave the farm. So
Yep.
it's just that to the next scale up.
Yep. Yeah, well, and farmers are getting so good now with technology. We're
Yeah.
starting to see one of the big differences I see on farms is actually the quality of heifers coming in now.
Mm.
Yeah, in terms of repro and also milk production.
Yeah, and this season, all the farmers I've been talking to have had really good cycling so far with their heifers. They're really
Yep.
excited.
Yes.
Which even though with the colder temperatures and that, I thought might be not as
Mm.
well as they're doing, but everyone seems to be doing well across the board. So yeah, I think people are pretty hot on feeding the heifers well and setting them up from
Mm.
kind of day one because they know that a little bit of money spent now is actually money in the bank longer term in
Yeah.
terms of how well they're going to perform and the quality of their animal and their resilience as an animal as well in terms of
Yeah.
health.
Absolutely. Oh, that's cool. Oh, thanks so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it. I've learned heaps today. It's been really interesting. So yeah, and I love the practical sides of what you do. If people want to get in touch with you to learn a bit more about what you do, how do they do that?
Uh, Well, I'm fortunately probably one of the few farm consultants that does social media. So if you look up Force of Nature on Instagram or Conan Moynihan on TikTok, I've started posting on there as well. I also have the Force of Nature podcast where I have people like Shaun on and talk in depth about topics that I want to learn a lot more about from all around the world. Or alternatively, just give me a call. I'm always happy to have a chat if you're trying to think about fixing a problem, I'm always happy to have a chat and just, hey, this is the person to talk to if I can't help you, or this is what I think is your way forward. And yeah, I operate kind of throughout Canterbury and down to Central Otago at the moment. And yeah, just always available essentially just to have a yarn.
Awesome.
Yeah, the education of the farmer is, I think, where we can really see the results come through.
Mm. Nice one. And are you happy for me to put your phone number in the comments?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, give me a
I don't
call.
know what I'd do if you said no, but it's all right. Oh,
No,
it's
it's all
it's
right.
just good. Like sometimes it's like, oh, I can't find you on Google or whatever.
Yeah,
If there's a number there,
yeah, link it in
primo.
there and give
Yeah,
me a call, send me a text.
yeah,
I'm generally pretty well available
yeah. Love
if
it.
I'm not on a meeting or
It's exciting times. I love to see what you and Kane and other guys are doing out there. It's yeah, it's great because there's so much opportunity to improve sustainability, improve farm performance, so that we have something that is improving month on month, so that when it goes to our kids and grandkids, it's actually a more valuable asset, which is super cool.
yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Kanan and team at Agronomics for basically helping me along and teaching me a lot of what they know. I wouldn't be have making so much gains in this space if it wasn't for them. And they've got a great model and really like to help teach the farmer what they know as well. So
Yes.
becomes their own ethos.
Yeah,
So
super empowering, eh? It's
yeah,
really, really cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Conan. I appreciate your time, mate. And thanks for jumping on, guys. Any questions, definitely fire them at Conan. It was 10 years ago that I was in soil science, so definitely feed nutrition is more my game. But yeah, thanks again, and look forward to connecting again soon.